Welcome back to Awaken Your Inner Genius. And we are here this evening with our panelists, Jim Porter, John Bonzel. Having an exciting conversation. Our other panelist, Karen Elkins, is behind the scenes helping us out tonight as she is working on our fabulous visual journey. You'll see her in the private chat and occasionally jump on possibly. Our other panelist is out for a surgery, so please send him lots of good healing, Ken Pearson. So why don't we go ahead and start with what we do on every Sunday night. You've had a busy weekend, a busy week. Let's pause for a moment. Tune in to the ocean sounds, which we also have available on our channel when you need to settle down. And let's just take 60 seconds to tune into our heart. Tune in to the universal heartbeat. I don't see the video on, but I know it's coming. And feel free to just close your eyes for a moment. And just have yourself centered here. Tune into the nature. Tune into the ebbs and flows. Bring yourself down to your heart space. Maybe place your hand on your heart, asking yourself what you would like to feel right now. And as you breathe in deeply and out deeply, become centered. Feel at one with nature with a capital N. And when you are ready, if you'll open your eyes. So here we are. We are on lesson 19 of unit 5. And so just take a look at where we're at. Hard to believe, you guys, that we've made it so far.
Indeed.
Yes. So if you'll take so much for the panel, crickets out there, wake up, guys. All right, here we are. So let's take a look at what's on the screen. I want to show everybody where we're at because our goal here this year was to follow through. And we'll see the slides on the screen in just a moment. And you'll see here we're at October 20th, lesson 19, the ethical basis of character and its gradual death. And so just a reminder for everybody who is brand new and for those of you that are returning, if you'll take a look about why we do this, and just want to remind everybody that we were inspired by this quote, mediocrity is self-inflicted and genius is self-bestowed. And so what this group of students have done is we've come together and we are focused, as you'll see, on the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. And that is the segue to what it is that we're doing because our focus is on the home study course. And John, you love this next quote.
Yes. If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe. And it is that simple. Kimberly, you and I spoke earlier in the week, and there was some concerns of people thinking, oh boy, they're getting ready to go over my head. No, we're not going over your head. So if you pass the first grade, you're good with us. You'll be able to follow us. So don't be afraid.
Well, and if you'll take a look at this next image here, I just wanted to remind you all, not sure if you've caught on yet, but when we start our broadcast, we don't start at 10, we start at 9. And that's exactly because it ties into what we just talked about. So hello, Bonnie. Hello, Deb. Hello, Dee. I'm so glad to have everybody with us. And so we focus there on the home study course, and you'll see that on the screen. And what we encourage is everyone to get a copy of their home study course. And, James and I were joking just the other day, and James and I were talking about, a lot of people are trying to be prepared, especially with Cuba and the blackout recently, trying to be prepared. And if there is ever something with the electricity, you're not going to be able to be on screen or on social media or on TV, and your home study course will help you get through that and take you to a whole nother level, won't it, Jim?
Yes, it will. It's salvation in dark times. It truly is, and it's gotten me through many of them.
And I totally agree with that. And so if you'll take a look at this next comment, what we've seen there is in vain we build the city if we do not first build man. But before we jump into the home study course, we have a little bit of a surprise here for the group. We have a blast from the past. So I want us to be able to forward here. Get ready, James. Forward to that, please. And so we have 2 pictures to show you here this evening. The first is this one. Take a look at Jim and Jackie. Now, this was back in the 1970s.
Man,
so,
you talked about a couple hippies.
Yeah, that's in Florida.
Tell us a little bit about this time period, Jim, because you and Jackie are the ones who have been with us there from the very beginning of Awaken Your Inner Genius. You also, we fall under your Age of Character clubs. Tell us a little bit about this photo. You two are certainly a cute couple.
Oh, thanks. We had just come home from a walk, and we lived in Florida at the time. You can see we were quite tan, and we were still suffering from chronic youth back then. And it's a nice fur button. That's adorable.
Well, you all look great. And you know what happened, John, is you know, I've been asking the porters to find me a picture of them from when they were young. And guess what was stumbled upon? Are you ready, John?
I'm ready.
We have a surprise for you. Everybody's been wondering, what did it look like back when Jim and John were at the palace with Leo? And let's take a look. We actually have a picture.
Wow. Look at that. Yeah.
Now, they're all the way back, John. There's evidence of youth. You both look very wise.
Damn, Jim, Mother Nature wasn't very kind to us, was it?
I think it was very kind to me, John, but you know, well, I don't expect to see a 23-year-old when I look in the mirror. I expect to see a 73-year-old, so there's no disappointment in the morning.
Okay.
Well, I love it. I love it. So,
well, that's a good surprise, Kimberly.
I know. I wanted to surprise you, John. And so I have to go back. You know, this was about the age range that you all knew Leo. Is that correct?
It is. That's within a year or so. Also, that's us on the Blue Ridge Parkway looking down into, what is it, Rockfish Valley, John?
Yes.
And the palace would be right above us, about maybe 150, 200 feet away.
All right. Well, John, we couldn't resist. We've been asking for a long time to be able to have you what it was like, and now we can have these lovely images in our heads. So a gracious thank you for Jackie for finding those photos. So let's go ahead and jump into the home study course tonight. Lesson 19, if we'll pull that up on the screen. And as we were reviewing lesson 19, I just want to ask John for a quick comment before we get into the very beginning. You know, this one was titled The Ethical Basis of Character and Its Gradual Death. So that is where we're going. And before I have you actually read those first few sentences, what was powerful to you about this particular lesson?
Are you speaking to me?
I am speaking to you, John.
All right, very good. Well, what stood out to me is as I read, and I read through this again and again and again, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, it doesn't seem like we've made much progress in 2,000 years. So here we are.
That's a little
now, we're not Confucius, we're not Lao Tzu, and we're not Jesus, and we're not Krishna, but we're coming in and we're riding their coattails to try to explain and share the same message. And that's why even that one quote that you put up, the second one, it might sound corny, and it may be 100 and who knows how many years old, 140 years old, but it is apropos to the world today. Technology is like gone nuts, and yet there's still this divide. The Middle East is on fire. You got wars going on. So I'm not quite sure we've bridged that gap yet.
Well, I am still hopeful, and that is why we're doing this. So let's go ahead and dive into that first sentence now. If you'll read that one, please. Greetings, Deborah, is that we shall now leap. Go ahead, John.
John?
Yes, and then yes.
Very good. We shall now leap ahead over a gap of 2,000 years to some 500 years before Christ, when Confucius was born. Confucius and Lao Tzu were two outstanding illuminates of China. Illuminates always teach the same things in practically the same words, And illuminates come invariably into the world when they are most needed to uplift a falling civilization with a message of love, given in words which always have an ethical basis in practice and never a doctrinal or phenomenal basis.
All right. I love
That's
that.
pretty
I
strong.
love that.
Yeah.
It is strong. And I love the way they capitalized a message of love. So, and would you, as we get ready to go into this, let me go to gallery view right quick. I did want to talk about Leo's international travel. So as we get into this, can you all share, perhaps Jim, you want to start, but Leo's name was actually changed. And I think that's an important part of the story as we get into this particular lesson.
It was changed by Dr. Russell. He started calling her Leo early in their relationship. According to what I've been told over the years, he thoroughly believed that in her previous incarnation, she was Leotess. And that's where the name was attached to her. I don't know whether she legally changed it or not. I just know that's the only name I ever knew her by. As far as her travels, yes, she was a world traveler. She was very successful early in life. She had a cosmetic company in England that was kind of in the vein of what we call Avon here, and ran it to a fair degree of wealth and success, and then sold it early in age. And her goal was to travel the world and meet all the people of the world so that she could see and bring back to the not as technically advanced world that we're in now, that everybody that she met around the world, everybody was simply looking for peace and love in their lives. Even when she would find herself in areas that were supposed to be war-torn and stuff, that's not the people she met. She met people that were looking for peace and love in their lives. And she said that is the predominant thought pattern of humanity. And what happens is we lose sight of that because we look at the accident that just happened over here or there as you're going down the road, not realizing that the rest of the roads on both sides of you are at peace and everything's flowing perfectly. So she always looked for the good.
That was an important part of the story, and I wanted to have you both comment on that because it was very obvious to me, especially in this unit and this lesson, that her travels from all over the world played an important role in the philosophy that she and Dr. Russell brought to the world. Would you agree with that, John?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with everything being said. And I want our audience to know that one of the first places that Leo visited was the pyramids. And it was important for her to see, to see that architecture. She knew, as a 360 illuminate, she knew what their purpose was and what they stood for and so on. So I think it was something that was deep, within her that needed to be done. And so I remember her telling stories about it. And she would also share the stories of being on cruises and getting hit on all the time.
Really? Well, I wanted to pull up one of the images there because I would like everybody to take a flashback here to 1936. This is one of the pictures that I had of her actually in Northern Austria. And since this home study course really is appealing to people of all faiths, I believe it's a unifying force for all faiths, to be honest with you. I just thought it was neat to go back and take a look at that. I don't know if it's possible to zoom in. It might not be, but I thought it was very interesting. Take a look at that car and the folks. And there she is.
Am I seeing Jim and Jackie in that car?
Yeah, there was a previous incarnation.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Well, why don't we go ahead and go back to the home study course?
Jim, let me throw one thing in here, just in the humor of what John said. The first time Leo met my wife, Jackie, the very first words she said to Jackie is, "Well, darling, haven't we met before?"
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, and who knows, maybe some folks that are listening to us. So I want to say gracious hello to all of our participants. Let's go ahead and keep diving into the home study course and jump ahead to page 352. Now, in 352, there were a couple of things. They go into quite a bit of detail, and this is a very, very big lesson, but I'm going to skip down to the bottom of page 352 here, where it says, we must realize, and it's in the brackets. Yes. So Jim, if you would just read those first two sentences there, please. Where we must realize.
We must realize, therefore, that Confucius, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, and Mohammed were not born into an ascendant civilization. Their civilizations had long been decadent, and their messengership to man was in the nature of being saviors of a decadent race instead of being new teachers of an ascending one. Our ancient, you want me to stop there? This is an important statement.
Well, yes, because I wanted to, yes. Can we go to you, Jim, on screen? And I'm going to.
All right. It's an important statement because John just touched on it. We're in an ascending time.
Yes.
It's a descending time for those that will not transform their thinking and their action and work to raise those that would repress humanity. Their time is over. It's past. Now there's a residual pull and tug by them to hold us from going forward. But there's so many forward-thinking people on the planet right now, and the very universe is locking in like a clock to a frequency change that will make it impossible for them to deceive us as they've done for the past 7,000 or 8,000 years. They've been able to deceive us because we were not mentally attuned enough to know that they were deceiving. We believed them. We were like children. But as we move into the new age and our brain kicks in and we begin to communion more in thought than in word, we're going to pick up this dishonesty in them, just like all the great masters would do. When you read about the great masters, all of them would know when someone was speaking falsely to them, and they would point it out. And humanity's moving into the stage where a great deal of us will know when we're being misguided, and we will see it coming, and that's what will finally stop it.
Well, and I want to pull up what Deborah just said, because and I slowed us down to think about this, because to me it was also Deborah says this: what a huge shift in perspective. What a huge shift in perspective. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you, Deborah. And that was one thing that really stood out to me, was the difference between a descending civilization and an ascending civilization. And John, I think that's really, really important for us to consider. And even Deb says this: an encouraging shift. Yes. So this is so as we go into tonight, there's a lot of conversation around Confucius and some of the others. I'm going to have us go ahead and jump to the top there of page 353. And it was talking, John, about the nobility of people like Confucius. So if we'll scroll down just a little bit, and starting where I've circled Confucius, can you, no, too far, James, go to the top where I circled Confucius. Can you cover those first two paragraphs, starting "if that is fully understood"?
I can. If that is fully understood, it will better explain the nobility of such a man as Confucius, who lived long among utterly licentious men and retained his nobility of mind and cleanliness of body, as well as the virtues he taught until his dying day. The virtues he taught were wisdom, rectitude, decorum, sincerity, and kindness. These were the qualities which he listed as the basis of character and right action. So here's what I'll say to that. I remember when I was in elementary school and middle school, there was decorum, and there was kindness, and there was a respect for each other. There were things that we did, like, for example, this may sound silly, but you were taught in primary school to walk down the right-hand side of the hallway. So whether you were coming or going, you're on the right-hand side and you're not bumping into other people and so on. Today, there's no such thing. There is no orderliness of that kind of thing. So I'm saying,
well, I don't know if completely that way, John. Some schools have it. Some schools do.
Okay. Well, that's good if they do, but not in society. I can tell you that. Hell, you can't walk down the street without bumping into somebody. But anyway, I'm just trying to give a subtle example that yeah, we might be on the ascending part of it, but we still got a hell of a long way to go. I can tell you that.
Well, I want to go back because some of these were words that aren't really used. So I looked up what rectitude meant, and I want to bring that up. So I'm curious if anybody there in the comments, if somebody can go ahead and look up decorum for me. But rectitude is this: the quality of the state of being straight, Okay, moral integrity, righteousness, the quality or state of being in correct procedure. So I see what you were talking about, John, in kind of order. And so I'm curious if somebody else can put in the chat box what the definition of decorum is. So we're going to see how well everybody's listening. What does wisdom
decorum.
mean to you, Jim? Decorum.
Well,
Thank you. What does wisdom mean to you?
Pardon me. Wisdom is the goal. As you try to work to build character, wisdom is the reward for working to develop a high character, because you learn from experience not to fall into unbalanced and unnecessary thinking. Not that we don't, but as we work more and more on building character, it becomes easier to get back into your higher state of mind and thinking if you've made it a habit. An example, real briefly for me, is throughout this week, the household has been hectic. We've had to deal with a lot of things out of left field we didn't expect. So out of the last 5 days, when I would normally get up in the morning, go out, meditate, read, ground in the front yard, and talk to Creator, out of those 5 days, I missed 4 of them. Today, it culminated in an amazing disruption in my thinking. And I was reminded how important it is to stay in routine and stay focused on character building. So, and this happens to all of us because life happens. But what happened this morning, first thing, once that hit me this morning, I stopped. I got dressed. I went out front in my bare feet. I sat down. I communed with Creator. I let the grounding take place. And I just was very thankful, as I always am, for the beautiful mountain valley that I live in.
Well, so and the decorum, so we have Deb took the challenge and Bonnie did well. Behavior in keeping good taste and propriety. Thank you, Deb. And Bonnie says behavior in keeping with also good taste. They must have copied it from the same Google. But listen, ladies, I can't tell you, lots of love for you for looking that up, because it did tie into that whole issue of orderliness. And I wanted us to slow down there, because as we're talking about Confucius, John, if we could go back to that next highlighted sentence saying he taught. Scroll down.
He taught that whatever a man gave out from himself, nature, inexorably gave back to him in kind, for that is really the law. Which is true, and that's what we've been talking about up to this stage. You know, it's interesting. My neighbor stopped by, and all he and I don't really like talking to the guy, but anyway, I was courteous enough to talk to him. But all he talked about was how to rip his fellow man off, whether it was going and stealing somebody's mortgage and stealing their home, or this and that and this and that. I thought, boy, how sad is that he's consumed with, researching how to rip somebody off, or how other people rip each other off, versus he could spend the same amount of time reading or endeavoring in more heightened conversation and stuff. So I just thought I'd give an example of it.
Yes. And I like that example, John. It's sobering when you think about people, and that's really what's become norm in our entertainment, which is part of why I don't even watch television these days. But as it continued in that particular paragraph, it said the early Egyptians taught that way. They taught that when any man who did not measure up to the standards of character or righteousness for a cohesive civilization, and then they go on to talk about how the family was held responsible for it. So let's bring up what Rebecca said. Rebecca says this: you project, yes, what you project is what you receive. Okay. And Karen says this: the only way for the human race to survive is to rebuild character and righteousness and equal service. And so as we continue down here,
Kimberly,
this was,
if I may, there was a time in my lifetime and growing up, if you acted, out of norm, if you were rude and inconsiderate or obnoxious, you were ostracized by your friends and your family. You weren't even spoken to. You were ignored. And those little things right there, those are teaching things right there. Those little subtleties. You don't have to be a damn genius to know what's right and what's wrong, or what's accepted and what's not in polite society. And we're far from that.
Well, we are, and Deb brings up this. She says it was important to dress for school, and when you were home, you changed into play clothes. Now I see pajamas in the public in the stores. So it is
Oh,
interesting how these small things really do add up to some of the large things. I think that's very fascinating. And as there was a great deal in this particular lesson, for any of you, please offer questions. For those of you that have already read this lesson, please go ahead and offer questions, because they go on a great deal to talk about Confucius. And Confucius there on the top of page 354, second paragraph, it again brings up Confucius. And Confucius says this, scroll down. Confucius held that nature, and again, notice how the Russells capitalized nature, would let a creature die if that creature refused to perform the work necessary for his own survival. And I found that very, very interesting to think about. That is something about the way balance is in the life. And so talk a little bit about that before we continue on, because we're going to end up going to page 355 before we end up taking a break. But Jim, how does this tie into this whole issue of nature actually has balance, and yet we in society don't have balance? So what is it that's driving it in relation to what we're talking about and what Confucius
Well,
had to
nature
say?
is controlled by instinctive reaction from God. That it has, the creatures of nature have a limited ability to break the law, and when they do, nature is very quick to remove them from the situation. We, on the other hand, who have developed free will and are conscious as a consciousness, have a greater ability to breach law or break law or do harm to others, thinking we're getting away with it. Wealth and power, we all see wealth and power seemingly endlessly get away with things that are not good, that are in some cases evil. And we think, where's the justice in this? It's wealth and power that protects them, but that's only temporary. When they go out
Kimberly?
of this body and return, they will deal with what they did when they don't have wealth and power.
I'll give you another example. You know, I live here on the farm, and my neighbors are farmers. And my one neighbor that has all these horses, well, he has so many that have been inbred and inbred. So Mother Nature will take care of herself. You can't fool her. So this one mare, you know, she aborted a fetus, and so the father was probably her get from maybe a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Mother Nature doesn't allow that. So I'm just saying that Mother Nature, you don't have to help Mother Nature along. She'll correct herself. It's man that tries to violate that principle of balance.
Well, and when you think about this, especially over the past 50 years, because as a child, I remember farming to be a very big deal. I relish the times of when I was on my great grandparents' farm on both of my mother's side of her great grandfathers, and we have become so far away from nature that we don't even get to experience nature putting itself in balance like that. So for many of us and many people, they've never even been on a farm, or they have no reason to see how nature is bringing itself into balance. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'll give you another example. Pardon me, James.
No, go ahead.
I went over to get a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven the other morning, and there was a gentleman there, and he was a new face. And I said, I see we got a new face here. I said, welcome. And he said, thank you. And he was from Leesburg, Northern Virginia, where there's just millions of people. And he said he doesn't like it down here. It's too quiet. People are too nice. You know, he's out of his element, right? He's used to discord, you know, just hustle and bustle and noise and all of that. He can't handle it. He can't handle the quiet.
Well, and that's part of what the interference is. So I think it's important for us to keep going. I do want to bring up Rita's comment. And so as I read Rita's, what I'd like to ask all of our participants who are listening, feel free to invite others to join us in. And hello to our folks on TikTok, as well as those on YouTube and Facebook. But please put in the chat box, when is the last time that you have stepped foot in a garden or a farm? I want to just hear from the participants. So Rita says this: it's man's thinking he's smarter than God. That's very, very true, Rita. And I genuinely believe that there's been a concerted effort to try to keep us distanced from okay, nature, distanced from, and actually think that this discord is normal. So I'm going to keep us going here because Confucius said another thing here on page 355. And it's important that in the circle where I circled and highlight on 355 is this. All right, so Linda says it's been 5 years ago. Thank you. Bonnie says today. I knew that would be the case with you, Bonnie. So it says this: in a word, the moral man can find himself in no situation in life in which he is not master of himself. Okay. And then I want to skip down to where I have the arrow. He puts in order his own personal conduct and seeks nothing from others. Hence, he has no complaint to make. He complains not against God or rails against man. And so I see that we have just a few responses of people who have been there in touch with nature. And so may this serve as an invitation to be able to have you go experience nature a little bit more. Maybe you go to your local farmer's market and go ask if you can go visit a farm, but find a way. Linda says she actually grew up on a farm, but find a way to be able to reconnect with that. And so I wanted to ask Jim and John if you could comment on those two elements. In a word, the moral man finds himself in no situation in life which he is not master of himself. To me, that is really having us take a hard look at not being a victim.
Yes, and you also can't blame God, as they pointed out. I spent a great deal of my first 35 years shaking my fist at God and posterity and saying, "How can you let this happen?" I've told you many times. Until one time, I was so angry, I actually pulled the coinage out of my pocket and threw it in the sky at God, and I said, "Take it. You know, this is all your fault." And literally in my brain, the words came, "I didn't do this. You did." And that was a shock to me. And it changed my thinking. And that was, God, I was in my mid-30s, so that was a while ago. But it's learning that you have to step up and be responsible for your actions. And when you know you're going wrong, you know you're going wrong. Stop.
Yes.
Relax, meditate, pull back, and don't do it.
Well, and to me, that's part of what I found so powerful about the Russell work is that they were really pulling out things that we take ownership over our lives. We're not waiting for somebody to save us. We're not waiting for somebody else to fix us. We're not waiting. And to me, that personal responsibility plus love, I found to be incredibly powerful, because when they said he puts in order his own personal conduct, I was like, wow. You know, I spent the past week organizing every closet, getting rid of the things that I don't need, putting my world in order. And when you think about how there's so much disorder, many people have said that when their homes or their offices are often a reflection of what's going on inside. Is that fair, John? Before we go to break?
Yes. I've often said to you guys, and I'll say this to our audience, that one of the responsibilities that we have, if you want to identify yourself as a Russell student, is not only the living of the message, but it's the demonstration of the message. Okay. And so your first responsibility is to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then when you have your own act in order, right, then everything will flow smoothly. I'll give you another example. I've had family in. I've got neighbors that come by my place a dozen times a day. I think today I reached perfection in my gardens and everything. And I stop and talk to them, but they never say anything. They don't see it. You see? So what you do is you love them. You talk to them. You let them express what is important to them. And then you just go on and you just keep doing what you do. And maybe one day they'll notice that.
When we return from our first break, we will continue with this conversation around Confucius and then continue with some others that were very, very impactful. And do note as we go through lesson 19, just how hard Walter and Lao Russell worked to be able to integrate belief systems, not separate them. And to me, that's incredibly powerful. But it is time for our first 3-minute break. So stand up, get some oxygen, maybe even walk outside and ground. 3 minutes, enjoy. We'll see you in 3.
All righty.
All right, if you'll find your way back. Find your way back. And for those of you that have the copy of your home study course, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. But let's start at the top of 356, because there were a couple of points that I wanted to make as we're redefining both on 356 and 357. And it says this. It says, it is the same system of laws. Scroll up just a bit, James. Same system of laws by which all created things are produced and develop themselves, each in its order, without injuring one another, by which the operations of nature take their course without conflict and confusion, the lesser forces flowing everywhere like river currents, while the great forces of creation go silently and steadily on. It is this one system. I really want to bring this up. It is this one system running through all that makes the universe so impressively great. So let's pause for a moment there. I've read this home study course 3 times now, and that had never really stood out to me. What does that say to you, Jim? That one sentence. Jim?
We're talking about the creative side of nature. See, nature is fixed, and it will not. I think the example that Russell's used several times in their books is, if you should step off a cliff, God's not going to eliminate the law of gravity to show His love for you. Nature, these laws are fixed, and we're all, tied to them, and to the degree that we choose to break them or work with them, we are broken or we are exalted, and you don't have to. You can give away a great deal of thought of responsibility about what's going on in the world when you accept the fact that they're learning their lessons in the time and the degree that they need to. And,
what stood out to me,
you don't stand up against unrighteousness and don't stand and defend. You do, but as long as the harm that they're doing is predominantly coming upon them, your only object is to point the way, but you can't make them walk the way.
Well, but what stood out to me in this thing was the one system. So we keep going back to this whole, the universal one, but it's the one system running through all that makes the universe so impressively great. And so, John, I'm going to have us scroll down to where I have the red brackets and the yellow highlight. And I'm going to ask John to comment, because it says this: it matters not what you inquire into, but when you inquire into a thing, you must never give it up until you have thoroughly understood it. When I read that again, I was like totally busted. It would be well to imitate the men of old who spoke little. For those who talk much are sure to say something. It would be better to have left unsaid.
Boy, I hope Ken's watching.
Don't you give him a hard time. Don't you give him a hard time. I thought this was beautiful for all of us to talk about saying something. And
Lao spoke very little. She spoke very little, but when she spoke, you listened to what she said. She did not run on excessively about anything, and she never demanded that you do this or that. She simply would tell you what she would like to have done, and then she would leave you to figure out how to do it, which was amazing to John and I, because we thought we'd be following orders. No, the garden needs this. Well, we'd have to figure out how to do it, where the tools were, especially when it's things we've never done before. Or when mailings came, we'd never done mailings before, but she knew we could handle it, so we handled it. When it came to repairing broken statuary, we'd never done that before, but she told us we were capable of it, so we did it. And,
wow!
And this is the difference in the mindset of the illuminate, is they don't question, can I? They just simply get busy doing it, and yes, without question.
Well, and that's what stood out to me when it was saying that when you inquire about a thing, don't give up until you've thoroughly done it. So, I have watched YouTube, Jim and John. I have watched you literally, the stories you've told me about being at Swananoa, and then what you did with the museum as you helped them get open again. I watched you both take on task and listen to stories about how it's just, there's nothing that you didn't think you couldn't do. And I wanted to have you, John, if you'll comment as well. That seemed to be a really important lesson that you both learned from Lao that was in the home study course. Is that faith that you can do anything. Mm-hmm. Keep the faith. John?
Yes. And this topic that we're on, and here's the thing, and this is kind of a strong word, but I'm going to use it anyway. Just because someone may be ignorant of the law, which James had up there, and you highlighted cause and effect. Just
Yes.
because you're ignorant of that, because those are the only two things in the universe. You were talking about the one thing of the universe. That's it. There is only cause and effect.
Mhm.
All right. And just because you may not be aware of that, and doesn't mean that that doesn't take effect. And so what this one statement is that once you master something or you become bored with something, it's time to move on. It's
Mhm.
it's now time for the next chapter and the next challenge in your life, kind of thing. And that, I think that ties into what Jim was saying. You know, they at one point the university had 31 people on the payroll to do what Jim and I did.
And Margaret.
Right.
And Margaret, yes. Well, so I thought this was important for us to think about today, because it said, if we'll pull up that cause and effect again, because this is something that humans really do struggle with. We have difficulty understanding cause and effect and how those things connect. And it says, do not forget to rectify an evil. I'm going to put evil in quotes right now, because it may seem small. For those small at first, it may continue to grow until it overwhelms you. And I saw this as cause and effect in so many things in the world. So we all know that we take a bite here and a bite there. All of a sudden we pack on 10 pounds and we haven't really paid attention, right? We all know that if we don't correct the small things when a child is young, that they're going to turn into big things when a child is older. And so for all of us, you know, there were some cities that have actually put in kind of movements to be able to beautify the city. And so when we start accepting trash in small amounts, it ends up being trash in large amounts. You know, this disorderliness, I think, is really important for us to consider. So let's go on down to page 350.
Could you just rattle off those disciples of Confucius there? James, could you back up just a little paragraph?
Sure. Oh, please. Why don't you go ahead and rattle them off, John? Please go right ahead.
I was reading those as you were talking. I was like,
do that?
Oh my goodness. That's a lot more complicated than Jim and John and Pete and Paul. And
well, mostly this would be notably Mencius, Changzhu, Yangchu, Kanghasai, and Yete Sesachan. So I don't have that 100% correct, but I do spend a lot of time with my Asian folks on my work, and I tend to work. But I knew you were testing me out there, John. So
very good.
Job.
I'm giving you an A+.
So on 357 here, so it says, maintain a love of harmony, that throughout your families the common speech shall be, let us help one another. Then shall the world be at peace. The above maxim is the very heart of an enduring civilization. It is the brotherhood of man principle taught by Jesus and every one of the great mystics or illuminates. So can we pause for a moment and have the two of you comment about the difference between the words mystic and illuminate, please? We'll go to the gallery view, and I want to comment on that before we go to the bottom of page 357.
Well, a mystic, in my understanding, in fact, Dr. Russell mentions when he went down in his story, when he went down to do the Edison statue, which was the first statue that he carved at 56 years old. He met Edison, and he said the man is he was a borderline mystic. He didn't say he was illumined. He said he was a borderline. He was hearing the voice, but he wasn't enlightened to the point yet. So to me, a mystic is someone who's listening and hearing the voice, but hasn't made the jump to enlightenment, to the flash of enlightenment.
Okay.
That's the way I would put it.
Okay. John, if you would, you've explained to me kind of this continuum of mystic and illuminate. Can you share that with the audience before we continue?
Yes. Well, there's a great distance and divide between a mystic and an illuminate. I can tell you that. Okay.
But talk
Remember
about the continuum. The continuum.
Well, the only continuum is a Christ conscious illuminate. That's it.
No. You have told me before there was barbaric man, there was genius, there was mystic, there was illuminate. That's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. It's genius followed by illuminate, followed by Christ consciousness.
Yes.
If I had to pinpoint it to an area, I would pinpoint the mystic somewhere between high genius and illumination. It's like the bridge between the two. That would be my guess. Now, are there degrees of mystics? Probably are. Are there illuminates that are mystics? Probably are. Are there mystics that are illuminates? I don't know. I've never discovered one. I've never heard anybody who did not have an illumination not call themselves illuminate. They didn't call themselves mystics. So,
Okay.
but, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. The point is that we're in constant we're in constant desire to become more enlightened as we seek to live life. That's it. And if it takes you through genius to mystic to illuminate to Christ conscious being, so be it.
Well, I'm bringing this up, and John, we lost you for a minute. I'm bringing this up because it was actually part of why we were inspired to do this Awaken Your Inner Genius, because genius is a pathway on the way to that mystic illuminate and Christ consciousness, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to research that a little further, they can do that through Leo's book, Why You Cannot Die. She spends an entire chapter on that progression. And it's beautiful, and she lays out which each is, and how the mystic is incapable of understanding the illuminate, and the illuminate can't understand the Christ conscious illuminate. The gap is so big, but that doesn't mean that we.
Okay.
My wife
So
just corrected you from the background, John, saying it's in God will, not why you cannot die.
No, it isn't. It's in Why You Cannot Die.
It's in both, according to John.
It was on in front of the Christ statue, Jim, because in the back it says Christ consciousness.
In the back of the Christ statue?
No, of Why You Cannot Die. But anyway.
All right. So the long-term folks have a little debate over with this. This is what I tell you about when I say that they played Brazilian bingo, which book is stuff in. But for all the participants here, I simply wanted you to understand, and if you would answer a question for us before I continue, and I'm going to be going to the bottom of page 357, James, where we have the star. But for all of you right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with the idea of your being a genius? So I would like us to just bring awareness to that before we dive in. James is going to bring up the bottom of 357. I'm going to ask participants to put this in there because I think this is very, very important and powerful for us to begin to have people get comfortable with this word genius. So it was talking about this. It said if civilization would reflect, could reflect such high state of ethics as the old Chinese philosophers taught, as exemplified in the following quotations, the world would have taken another step toward its goal of unity. I have 3 precious things that I hold fast and prize. The first is gentleness. The second is frugality. And the third is humility, which keeps me from putting myself before others. It is now, this next sentence is very powerful. Notice they have it underlined. It is a notable characteristics of these teachings that wealth was measured by these qualities, which cost nothing, while he who had great material wealth without these qualities which make character was considered poor indeed. Poor indeed. So let's pause for just a moment here. I'm still waiting for people to answer because what I want to go to this gallery here. Deborah, I'm so glad you answered. Thank you very much. Deborah says a 7. I want to bring this up to everybody because as we're talking about mystics and geniuses and illuminates through all of this, when someone steps into that goal and says, okay, that genius that is within, because that's why we have it titled this, that is real wealth. Is it not, John?
Yes. Big time.
All right.
It's interesting that you were mentioning those 3 items, and it kind of brought back some memories of my ex-wife. I think she specialized in the second, frugality.
There you go. Well, I thought this was powerful because and Bonnie, let's bring up your comment. Bonnie always makes us laugh, and so the others, as you're still thinking through this, Bonnie says, I had a whole summer of trying to eradicate slugs in my yard. I thought I would be considered genius compared to a slug, but they're way smarter. Genius needs to be defined. That's actually part of that's funny, Bonnie. That's part of what this whole awaken your inner genius, because what I explained to Jim and John is that there are many who still are intimidated by this word genius because the way we've described it in society is something very different than what it actually is in context of the home study course. Is that fair?
That's fair. Let's look at, take a moment in your mind and imagine that there's a radio with a single dial in front of you, and and the radio represents enlightenment, and there's those channels there: pagan, barbarian, genius, illuminate, Christ conscious being. You are the radio. Your consciousness is absolute godliness. You simply are not tuned into the station that can allow that to manifest in your life right now. You're in the process of perfecting body and thought to be able to do that. Nothing is denied and nothing is kept away from us. The absolute total of presence of God is you. It's within your body as you. You simply are not tuned into that frequency right now, but you will be. Just like a genius, we use the term Edison. Edison was definitely a genius who communed with thought, but he was also a bit of a rascal and was not always nice to people. And we've heard the stories about how he treated Tesla and others. That doesn't mean that you can't have this enlightenment. We always want, and I'll tie it up, I promise. We always want to think about the mystics and the geniuses and the illuminists that we hear about through history as perfect people. But when you study their lives, they weren't. Right. They were people who became this, but they were not perfect in the process. It's like learning to drive a vehicle. You're not perfect at thought, but you have all the ability to become very good at that, given time and place. So yes. That's why I don't judge people who haven't found their way to enlightenment yet. My God, if I was going to do that, I'd have to judge myself because I haven't.
There you go. Let's pull up Karen Mahan's comment there. She said, all three of these characteristics do not come easily. I've had to feel my spirit to acquire them. Love that, Karen. I think that's very, very powerful. And James, I actually, if you would go to the top of page 358 there, because this ties into what we're saying, and also a message that I was given many years ago. And it says this, if a man wishes to attain the excellence of superior beings, let him first cultivate the virtues of humanity. For if he is not perfect in human virtue, how shall he reach immortal perfection? To starve is a small matter. To lose one's virtue is a great one. And so I thought it would be helpful. One of the things that for early in my life, and this has been something over the past 10 years, I kept hearing God say to me, you can't be trusted with the big things until you do the small things well. And that was just something for me when I was looking at all of this, is that's part of this whole goal, is about the orderliness and all the things that we're talking about here, when we do the small things well, and really, when you think about it, everything's a small thing. And so I simply bring that up because it was a powerful reminder that when we let order go in some of the small things, how are we going to advance into higher and higher levels? Any thoughts from the two of you?
All I can think of is that story of you selling your soul to the devil.
What do you mean?
That last paragraph. That's what comes to mind to me. Is that you'll sell all that is good about you for material gain. So if you'll give up the virtue of yourself for material gain, then you got a long way to go.
Well, yeah, and that's what the body nature was bringing forth to Jesus when he was being Christed. It was showing him that now he had the ability and the power to manifest and conquer the kingdoms of the world. People have no idea what an illuminate, let alone a Christ-conscious being, is capable of. Now, on the joking side of it, John has a picture, he shows us once in a while, of Jesus standing amongst the Romans, and all the Romans are dead, and he's standing there with the cross broken, with a look on his face like, anybody else? See, he had the power to do that, but he chose to teach love and forgiveness, and that was the difference.
Yes.
Well, and so I want to bring up Rita's comment. Rita says, thank you, Jim. You made it sound accessible to us all instead of relegated to a special few and unattainable to the majority. And Rita, that's the point of what inspires me so much about this work, is that what they're doing is they're helping to awaken us one word at a time. I've heard John and Jim say many times that Leo would say that every word in the home study course was a mini illumination. and that each time that we're studying it, and even when we're doing these visual journeys that Karen gifts us at the end of each session, are all there designed to help us achieve this. Because then what will happen to the world when we have 500 and we have 1,000 and we have 10,000? I mean, I have great hope for the world, John, and I genuinely believe that we are going to see some of this power here, here in our lifetime. So I'm, my
it's
middle name is
interesting.
Faith.
I wanted to just put into perspective Rita's comment. The Russells have told us that there's only been approximately 200 geniuses and a half a dozen illuminates since the dawn of the human race. So it's going to take a while. This journey is not a quick one. It takes a while.
Quick one. It's not a
No, it
quick
is
one,
not.
but I genuinely believe, John, that we are on the cusp of a time that has never been faced before by humanity. This is my Kimberly Faith's belief. And I believe that if for many of us that are there on the cusp of the awakening, that we're going to see some amazing things happen for many of us in this lifetime. So we'll see. I don't believe it's going to take another 2,000 years for every day that I do this and that I pour my love into things like this. I am optimistic because I'm seeing the lights turn on in a greater and greater fashion. And so as we get ready to go into our break here, I want to just simply mention that first paragraph under conclusion on page 358. We still have a lot more to discuss, by the way, but it says, in these fragments from the wisdom of a great illuminate whom God sent into the world to help man awaken the light of love. Notice light is capitalized and love is capitalized in him. We see an example of the continued struggle of the divinity of man for recognition, but resisted by the material senses of the bodies of men for sensation, wealth, and power. And so as we go into this break, I encourage everyone, I invite everyone to think about your abundance far beyond than what we've been trained for in this sensed world, because that's what was inspiring to me as I read this. Okay. So Bonnie says this before we take our break: it seems that known geniuses were put there by other people. And this genius we are studying is one that we recognize in ourselves. Quite pointed there. Quite pointed there, Bonnie. I love that. And Deb says this: yes, Kim, we are in an ascending time, not a descending time. And I believe that's going to be the powerful that we have here. So we have a lot more to cover. We have over 30 participants already. Please feel free to invite others. We have a lot of people that watch these shows after the sessions are over. And I do want to remind everyone that for those of you that are with us every Sunday night, that is awesome. We're so excited to see you. For those of you that sometimes get overwhelmed, you can always go back and listen to this as many times as you would like. And for those of you that aren't sure yet, remember, sometimes I found on my journey of consciousness that listening to these things in the background while I was doing other things helped my consciousness gain and grow so that I was ready. So remember, there are lots of ways. And there's a Facebook group. So we're going to place that in the chat box. We invite you all to join our Facebook group, and we're building this momentum. So please take your 3-minute break, get some water, stand up, stretch a little bit, and we're going to continue the conversation for lesson 19, unit 5. Good night, everyone, and feel right back. Now, with each lesson, please know that each lesson is incredibly powerful on its own, and there's no way, as the music stops, there's no way that we can cover everything. And so it's always a delicate tap dance to be able to figure out what it is that we want to cover. But John, I found this next part amusing, and I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly because we still have a lot to cover. On the bottom there of page 360, that's when they said we now study Lao, another great Chinese illuminate. And so there on the bottom of 360, I wanted to mention a couple of things because there was something. All right, so scroll up just 360. Okay, 360 right there where the green arrow is. Okay, so on the second paragraph, it says the Christian prelates conceived Jesus as a being immaculately born by being fathered by the Holy Ghost. Scroll up a little bit. It says Chinese Taoists were a little more spectacular. They conceived. Am I saying it right? Lao? How do you say it?
I say it as Lao Tzu, but I don't know what the correct term is.
I hear it so many, but they said they conceived Lao Tzu to be fathered by a shooting star and carried in his mother's womb for 62 years, then born fully matured with white hair.
His poor mom.
Fascinating. I did not know.
Which version do you like? Do you like the virgin birth or the guy that took a long time to get here?
Imagine being pregnant for 61 years.
Poor
All
thing.
right, so as we continue down there, here's what's funny. Continue to scroll down to 361, to the top of 361. It says the chief thing which characterizes Lao Tzu from other men was his ability to obtain knowledge from the cosmos through meditation. And in what unit did we cover meditation, John?
Meditation was number 1, I believe. 2.
Unit 1.
Prayer
Unit
and meditation. 1. Meditation and prayer. That's it.
He openly declared that the informative knowledge which any man received through his senses was of no value whatsoever. He claimed that the only knowledge of any value to man was the spiritual knowledge which comes to man by direct communion with the cosmos itself. I thought that was pretty powerful. I mean, because there are many people here in the world that really only believe what they can touch and see.
I can't say that I'm in 100% agreement with that statement.
Oh boy, we're starting a debate. I am not even halfway through, John.
Now hang on. But let me tell you what the Russells say. That when you have God as your teacher, you need no earthly teachers. Something very similar. But there are things that can be learned from your fellow man, whether it's in, construction or restaurant business or whatever. So
Sure.
I can't honestly say that that's like an absolute thing because there's lots to be learned from other people in life in general.
Well, it's like a library. There's books on the shelves that have knowledge of how to that you can glean from, but that is not illumination. That's parrot and repeat. The Russells refer to that as parrot and repeat. Some of us are very good at parrot and repeating, and it's not that it doesn't have its place. Even Dr. Russell, after his illumination, when he decided he would write the universal one, had to learn the language of science as man understood in order to communicate with them. He admits it. He didn't speak that language. He was an artist. He wasn't a scientist. Even though he came back as an accomplished whole, complete science and knew the workings of the universe, he had to put that knowledge into them in their language.
Yes.
And it took him years.
Well, so in my corporate job, I teach systems thinking. And whenever I go to whichever industry, I always take the same principles, but I use their language to teach. And I think that is actually a gift of love. And that's part of what I really appreciated. We're going to scroll down to the bottom of page 363 because the Russells also talked about the Hindus. And so this notion of tying together so many of these belief systems is incredibly powerful. So sit right there where the star is, James. Go up a little bit where the star is. It says the Hindus interpret the Buddhist meaning as inaction and freedom from all desire, while the Japanese Buddhists, who had a deeper comprehension of the powers of meditation because of Lao Tzu's teaching, is a creative quietism. filled their meditation with desire for creation, and then followed it by action. So this was really, really interesting. And they said there in the brackets, we have many times said that a man becomes what he thinks. Okay. The difference between the entire mental and physical habits of Hindus and Japanese is marked by the difference in their thinking. The more you yourself can carry that idea of creative quietism, I thought that was a powerful phrase, by the way, into your meditation by consciously asking while consciously desiring, and then becoming one with God in his one great stillness, the more you will be enabled to sit at the feet of the universal teacher and become aware that all knowledge and power are within you. That's a power-packed paragraph.
It is. And what they're pointing out here, from my understanding, is that we're not here embodied to commune, spend our life communing with God in meditation, and then doing nothing with the knowledge that we have. We are here to manifest divinity. And you manifest by divinity by becoming an expression of it in all that you do. Yes. So it's not a passive thing. It's an action thing. It's backed through knowledge and driven by desire to manifest that which you've come to know. And it's I'm trying to say this gently. Dr. Russell, in his writings, did not speak highly about the person that sought illumination just to sit and contemplate their navel to gain more illumination. And if you look at the true great illuminates, none of them did that. Right. Once they attained it, they went out to share it and give it to the world. They didn't sit around under their, tree contemplating their navel. You can. There's no God's going to come off the mountaintop and tell you can't do that, but it doesn't fulfill the purpose of creation. The purpose of all of creation and every one of us is to manifest divinity. That's the purpose.
Well, and so my daughter is now 27, and one of the things I've told her as she's grown up her whole life is that her spirituality is the number one most important thing in her life. That being dedicated to that spirituality was number one. I would often teach her that that her taking care of her physicality and the gift from the divine was second. And she and I would have many conversations about people that we would meet along the spiritual path, because just like you said, Jim, there were many along the spiritual path that would talk and teach, but they would do nothing with the knowledge. And then there were others who would do lots of stuff, but they weren't connected to the divine. And we often talked about the importance of having these two things come together. And so, John, I found that particular section really powerful, talking about that creative quietism. Any comment you want to make?
Well, I think James has and yourself has wrapped that up pretty good. I mean, you got to get off your ass and do something. It doesn't help yourself to go into this quiet creativity, but there's got to be purpose, right? There has to be purpose behind your thinking and your actions.
Let me jump in here. John, let me jump in for just 1 minute.
Sure.
I really want to impress this upon people, because I was lucky enough to be there and witness it. Now, we've talked about doing repairs to some broken statuary when we pulled the stuff out of the warehouse that had been for 20 plus years. But John did something that was absolutely genius. Now, what we found out is the Christ of the Blue Ridge, which on its pedestal stood 30 feet tall. Wow. So Christ was about 15 feet himself, the pedestal another 15 feet, give or take a foot. When we found, when the Christ of the Blue Ridge that was on the mountaintop, they tried to remove it, we've told you before, it fell apart and broke into hundreds of pieces and was damaged beyond repair. What we found when we went into the warehouse to bring everything out is that there was a Christ of the Blue Ridge in pieces in the warehouse, but they were not finished pieces, and they were not exactly the same. They were from different pours, maybe ones that had failed. Now, John had 5 pieces making up Christ from his feet to his head that together stood about 15 feet tall. Each of them needed an amazing amount of restoration and work, and yet he had to make the things that didn't fit together, because they were from separate pours, fit together, look like they were done properly, and look like the pictures of the Christ of the Blue Ridge that we all saw. He did over a period of, 6 months to a year. He made this happen right in front of me. And I was constantly blown away because I'd go home for a couple of weeks and I come back for a weekend, and there he'd be down there still working. And these pieces were going from a what do you call it? Disunit, a non-unified 5 pieces that he made unified to look like each other, and then was able to put them together and move it upstairs. It's on display in a museum now, and it's as beautiful a Christ of the Blue Ridge as you'd seen Dr. Lao put out. Not because he made it different. He knew he could make it be what their vision was, and he channeled that vision, and it led him to make that happen. So if you're ever lucky enough to visit a museum, or you go online to see the museum, look at that statue. This is the difference between knowing you can do something and thinking you can do it. He didn't think he could do it. He knew he could do it, and he manifested that beautiful statue again, which would not be there for the world to enjoy had it not been for that effort on his part. That's genius.
That large cup of coffee that you wanted. If you come down tomorrow, I'm gonna make sure you get it for that
second cup.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a question before we're going to go down to the bottom, page 367. Deborah says this: aren't our senses just a feed system for gaining a deeper understanding of communications with the universe?
Well, to a certain degree, but that's why you have a mind. You have a mind. Your mind is the same mind as God, and all that is available to you. You know, your senses, they play a role, they play a significant role, but they're not the end all and be all.
I would look at them as tools. They're the tools that we're given to manifest divinity. We don't always use them for that. Just like you can give somebody a hammer and they can build a house and give it to someone else and they can kill somebody with it. It's knowing how to properly use the tools.
What I find is that humanity gets very blinded in this whole issue of they think that's all there is. So when I'm in workshops and I talk about the energy of people, or if I'm talking about divinity, or I'm talking about creation, I'll have many people say, oh, well, I don't believe in anything that I can't touch or see. And I'm like, excuse me, do you pick up your phone if I sent you a text right now? Do you believe that the text I send you is going to arrive? Do you use a GPS to get to the airport? So we believe in things we don't touch or see all the time, but you see where humans get blinded. Okay. So that's what happens, Deborah, is that issue of we only take that one linear way of thinking through things. So this is a really tough lesson because there's so much to cover. I'm going to move us forward, folks, knowing there's so much more to go, but I wanted to take us to the bottom of page 367 because an important part for all of us as we're sharing this with other people and enjoying this journey for yourself is I want to go down to what I have highlighted where I wrote powerful. Scrolling down to page 367, and I know there's a lot that I'm missing here because we've got a lot to do, but I wanted to mention this to everybody. No greater philosophy of life has ever been written than these words of the illuminate of China. Take careful note of their similarity to the teachings of Krishna in the Song of God, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita. Now, someday I hope that we have this channel actually syndicated out to many, many countries. And please, I encourage you, if you have others in other countries, reach out to them and invite us. But part of the power for the Russell work is this intentional effort based on Lao's global travels to unify all of this together. Is that a fair way to say it, Jim?
Yes, it is a unity. And each of these people were mystics, and they did speak different languages, but they gave the same message. And,
yes.
And that's the beauty of reading the core teachings of all the great religions of the world and some of the unknown ones, because in their core, they're beautiful and they're simple and they're direct. Now, some of what follows in the after times when other people put their opinions in there can move us away from the core message, but the core message is always the same. It's love ye one another, and you are an evolving being. That's the message.
Kimberly, I would like to remind our audience that in one of Dr. Russell's lectures, he pulled out his little pocket version of his Bhagavad Gita from his suit jacket, and he opened it up and he showed people, hey, he had marked all over it, and he said he wouldn't take $1 million for it. So that's a 360-degree cosmic conscious illuminate telling you that what's in that little book is pretty powerful for him not to want to ever give it up. So
let me ask you. let me ask everyone, if you would, in the chat box, let us know whether you've read the Bhagavad Gita. I found it to be a beautiful work. So Karen says, was that fixed statue at Swananoa? And Karen, I would say no, it was after Swananoa. Correct, John? You fixed that.
It was stored. It was stored at Swananoa when we were there, in pieces in the barn, a large building off the palace. It was almost the size of the palace where the original owners kept horses. It was stored in there with so much of the art that was damaged by a bunch of what Dr. Russell referred to as hooligans, young people that broke in there one night and took boards and hatchets and things to it and broke it all up. We're still repairing that stuff to this day. And that's what we're talking about when Leah would say, you can do this.
Yes.
You could go down there and do it. So, it was there, but we never saw it. John and I went to the barn once, but you'd have to picture the bottom of the barn was filled with artworks. It's so hard to convey to people how productive Dr. Russell was.
Yes.
And John refers to 4%. I believe it was only 2% of his works that filled the museum is just 2% of what he did in his lifetime. So you get an idea of this productivity of that genius state of mind and the human state of mind.
So Linda Robinson says this, I remember seeing the statue at Swananoa and again at the museum. And that's probably the number one thing. We had 400 people that came through the museum just a weekend ago when there was a big community event. And the number one thing that people say is, wow, this is the work of all one man. And when you tell them it is less than 2 or 4% of what work of Dr. Russell, their mouths just are like, wow. Deborah says this. Deborah says, Indigenous leaders say we do not have the right to teach anything until we are living that truth. Very, very interesting perspective there, Deborah. Deborah. So I want to scroll down, please, to the bottom of page 371. And what I want to encourage everybody is when you have your own copy of this home study course, because we're not able to cover everything as you see, they go into more conversation around Walt Whitman. Again, they were talking about Walt Whitman as a great illuminate of the day. And so they were literally, if we'll scroll down to the bottom of page 373, what they do is they talk about all of these people at a time that most of us have just read about this. Okay. And stop right there. And the highlighted part, go up a little bit. It says this, when they were bringing out a little bit more, James, it says every great person who ever lived was great only in the measure of his God awareness. Those whom we call the immortals were immortal only because that which is immortal in them found expression. Those millions who are only mortal die and are forgotten. Those immortals who have God awareness never die.
And that's the difference between art and great art. Art that's inspired by the Creator will live forever.
Very, very powerful. And I wanted to bring down, if we'll go down to 374, I want to talk about noise, because this is something that you referred to earlier and something that's really important for us all to be very aware of. It says one more thought to add to this is to call your attention to the average human who wishes to be surrounded by a crowd most of the time and will never permit himself to be alone. Observe the average man or youth who finds himself alone or surrounded by silence. He will soon turn on the radio or television or telephone, or ask someone to come over or offer to go over. Is it any wonder that the human race is deteriorating intellectually and spiritually? Very few educational institutions give any thought to this calamity of man, and parents give but little heed to it. This is important because we did not have a 24-hour news channel until 1980. CNN was the first channel. I'm not sure if you all know this, but CNN was the first channel that actually created a 24-hour news broadcast. For many of you that grew up, do you remember life before 24-hour television? Before 24-hour news?
I'm not that old.
I see. Aha. I see Jim shaking his head. Linda, I'm the same way. I'm the same way with you. Miss Linda says, I need my quiet time and solitude. So something for us all to consider is how much time do you spend in silence? Are you able to hear, or are you keeping yourself so busy all the time with music, with videos, with audible books, with television? Are you always in such a state of noise that you can't hear what the divinity is trying to say to you. And I felt that was really important, because when you look at 1980 all the way through now, that is a concerted 44 years of a concerted activity for us not to hear. I watched over the past 40 years how the noise in airports has increased. The noise everywhere has increased. And I don't think that's accidental. Guys, you want to mention, because I look to where we're going?
Yeah.
Well, accidental is, yeah. Go ahead, John.
Go fill up your car with some gas.
That's what I was
Christ,
going
now
to say.
they got videos and noise as you're pumping your gas. You can't get away from it. They inundate you with it. And as Jim often mentions, the powers to be, that's how they want it. But their days are coming to an end, I hope.
So if we go down here to 378, because I'm very mindful of the time and I want to get through the end, because we need to get through the end so that you'll enjoy what we're talking about here in the visual journey. But for those of you that are interested in history, I find that the Russell work is a beautiful intersection of spirituality, of science, of art, of history, and it's like this intersection of this treasure. And so would you, John, share with everybody, they talk about a lot of these people that many of us have just read about. We don't have time to go all into it, but they talked about how the idea of a scientific organization and this whole idea of the University of Science, I scroll down just a little bit, James, the University of Science and Philosophy was such a university that as he envisioned. And so can you talk a little bit about the Twilight Club and invite people to consider what that was fun as far as the Twilight Club? What was it? Remind everybody the kinds of people that they used to interact with that actually had the seeds planted to build the University of Science and Philosophy.
Well, you think about it. Edwin Markham in the early 1870s, he felt that society had fallen to such a degree that he wanted to dedicate his life to uplifting mankind morally and ethically, all right, to bring character back into the world. So all the great names that Jim and yourself and others have mentioned along the way, right, were part of this group. And their goal was to exemplify, and they would meet a couple times a year, and each would give to the world something from their field of endeavor. So whether it was painting or writing, right, sculpting, music, whatever it was, they would create a something to give to the world to demonstrate that. So, and I'll just give you a quick history here. So you had these great minds that came together, and they would meet in New York and other places. So some of the names, and James, you can chime in here too if you want, but offshoots like the Rotaries Club and Lions Club, Moose Clubs, all of these were offshoots of this group. But the foundation was, the building of character in man. And so Dr. Russell and Tom Watson, founder of IBM, they would alternate presidency of this organization. And then World War II brought it to a stop. And Tom Watson, he bailed out. Okay, I don't know if he bailed out or he died. But anyway, so Dr. Russell picked it up, meets Leo, and they originally named it the Walter Russell Foundation. And then it was renamed University of Science and Philosophy. So there you have it. So here we are. So what, approximately 150 years later, this panel on this broadcast and the university itself is trying to keep that message and that momentum alive through this work. So.
Well, and I wanted to go to the bottom of page 380 because it goes from 380 to 381. And for everyone who is watching now or in the future, so the bottom of page 380 there, I want to bring something up to you right there. It says, do you not therefore see how powerful you can become by adding your, scrolling up there, adding your power to the work of this university by becoming part of it instead of working alone as an individual. Wow. To transform mankind. You now have only the unit power of one, but when you become part of 10,000, then you have a 10,000 unit power. If the human race is to be transformed, it can be only by a mighty concentrated effort. The university can be that concentrated effort only by having the concentrated effort of 1 million individuals molded into its oneness.
Isn't that
so
wonderful?
That's what you're saying. So you're saying that all those years ago, this vision that they had, and this is important because I see far too many people and leaders today not having enough vision. And part of what I respect so much about the Russells was the fact that they had a vision and they worked to make it a reality by opening up this university. And so, as Jim says, we could be speaking to someone in the year 2045. Jim says that would be 150 years out, right, Jim, based on what John just said. But
Yes.
for all of you that are listening here, please understand that you're tuning into this isn't just you on this one individual path. Will it benefit your life? Absolutely. But your power is being multiplied. Listen to what John said. You are tied all the way back to the Walt Whitmans, the Henry David Thoreaus, all of the people that they're talking about that came together and cared so much about humanity that this university became a reality. And so I'm going to, John, say something to someone who is listening to this in the future, that's listening to this all by themselves in a house, no family around, and they're wondering, what can they do to contribute to humanity? What would you say to them?
Well, the contribution that you could give to humanity is find someone of like thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And once you understand universal mathematics, once you understand the sphere and the cube, the Russells tell you that when you have two people of like-minded thinking, the two of you are 8 times more powerful than you are as an individual. And so, Kimberly, you were mentioning numbers. So I don't even know what the hell the cube is of a million. Okay, 1 million times 1 million. So I'm just saying, but that's how quickly the world could be transformed. And I think that was the message being sent there in that paragraph. And so that's what I would say to a new person. That's what I would say to someone in the future, is that, your contribution along with others is what moves this thing forward.
And that actually brings us to the last page, 383, before we go on our visual journey. And please make a note for anyone who's had questions. But they called it their finale there on page 383. And it says this: and now we say to you. So I want you, before I read this, I want you to think about this as if you were standing in front of them back in the 1950s. And now we say to you, do not be confused with the complexities of life. When life seems complex and you have decisions to make because of these complexities, remember this one thing. You have only one simple decision to make at this moment. Only one. The next one has not arrived yet. Talk about profound.
Yes, Dr. Russell tied in his quote that now is eternity. That's how I would tie into that small paragraph. Yeah, don't worry about the next now, but because of the avoidance principle of nature, which we'll get into the science, just know that now is eternity, because all you have is this moment, and you have to capture it, and you have to make it all that you can possibly do it, and then you move on to the next moment, and then the next moment.
Well, and I love that they said that one decision you must make is that you shall do only that which makes you loved. There is no decision other than that which any man may make and find happiness for himself and give happiness to the world. And so as we come back here to there you go. As you come back here to gallery view, that the power of all of you joining us and being on this journey with us and spreading the news and talking with others. I want to say a gracious thank you to all of our TikTok followers, our YouTube followers, those of you on Facebook. Many of you have been with us since the very beginning. This is episode 22 officially. We practiced the 3 months prior to that. as before we come back to Q&A, though, we have 2 gifts from Karen tonight. And she did this in 2 separate videos so that you could enjoy it on the YouTube channel. The first is the Code of Ethics from Lao, which came from our last lesson. And so we're going to show that video first, and then James is going to show a video that Karen did for us about the poet's journey. So 2 videos to watch here during our visual journey. Sit back, relax, and see what shows up for you here this evening. Wow. Both
Boy,
of
that was
those.
inspiring. Ooh.
Both of those were absolutely beautiful. So can everyone join me in giving a gracious thank you to Karen? She's in the background working on our next visual journey for next week. And those were both powerful. And we did this in 2 clips so that you all could share this on social media. So Lao's Code of Ethics, there was something that really stood out to me this time that I don't think I've actually intuited before. It said, if you hurt yourself, you hurt your neighbor. That was, so in one of those slides, that's what it said, Jim.
It said, I believe the correct quote is, it is better that you hurt yourself than that you hurt your neighbor.
Okay, so we'll have to double check that because I know that Karen is working on all of those details. So I found that very fascinating. And then the Poet's Code of Ethics, okay, the Poet's Code of Ethics was another small video. So we were making these in smaller clips that you all could share. So please help us gain the followers and the viewership on the channel so that we can continue to do that. So Miss Linda says beautiful. And we always know that many of you want to see those things more than once. They are listed on the channel afterwards. So Any questions? Any questions from fellow students, from aspiring students? Any thoughts here as we're waiting for the questions? Jim or John, do either of you have a comment here at this point?
Oh,
The answer is no.
I don't.
I have a comment. What we touched on was truly, just the surface.
It was.
That these lessons in this unit are so powerful, they're so profound, and we really didn't do justice to them, but because of our time constraints and so on. And that's why, and I want to say this again, that's why this is a self-study. Mm-hmm. It's between you and God, and you got to get in there and you got to do your part. We'll do our part and you do your part, and we'll do this thing together.
Well, and we want to encourage any of you, we'll drop in the email into the chat box, but I do hear from some that sometimes the reason we don't ask questions is people are like, well, I don't want my question to appear dumb or like I don't get it. And so you are welcome to email us. We'll drop that in the comments. You're welcome to email us any questions you have, and we'll bring those questions to the next session, because we want this to be a spirited, robust interchange between all of us that are interested in elevating humanity. That's truly what we're about here. Jim?
Yeah, the prelude at the end, I think, was wonderful, because if you paid attention to it, what they're doing is they're letting you know that they're about to change their course from how to commune with Creator and how to build personal character and love for your fellow man to how, from having the talent to do that, learning how to do it, to actually doing it. So what they've given us in the first 6 units, in my thinking, is they've given us the foundation upon which we can build anything we want in life. Now we're going to, for the next 6, move into the science, showing you what is universal law and how to utilize it to manifest what you want, and what is against universal law and how it would bring you down if you unknowingly utilize it for personal gain and things like that. It's going to be a wonderful journey. And,
yes.
And this science is not hard. When you're meditating, remember, breathe in, breathe out. That is the science.
Yes.
Concentration, decentration. That's it. They're going to show you the steps of concentration from the first octave through the 4th in carbon, and then from the 4th back out to the 1st, and the cyclic nature of it. And that's what John means when he talks about if you can count from 0 to 9. Once you've completed anything that you have are seeking to manifest, once you complete that task, you've gone through the 9 cycles of manifestation. And you can do this in multiple areas of your life at the same time.
We're getting there. We're getting there. So what Jim is offering is an invitation of where we're going. So for next Sunday, we will be going into the last lesson for Unit 5. And so I want you to think about this, how far you all have come, how far we've come together. We've done Unit 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we will be wrapping up lesson 5, unit 5. And so you are almost to the halfway mark. And then we'll be going into unit 6 and diving into the things that Jim was just talking about. So I want to remind you of where we are. And so just want to remind you here that Ken is sending love to everyone, and our entire team is sending love to everyone as we're wrapping up here this evening. And so, we missed a session 2 weeks ago because we were doing a photo shoot together, and we could not have made it any more perfect to be at a place that actually had the words love, because that is in fact what we're all here about teaching. And so as we go to gather review here, we want to remind you all, feel free to drop your questions in Facebook. We'll also put the email, because I have several of you that said you want to ask anonymous questions, and we want to honor that. We want to honor that. So we'll look forward to seeing you in this. A gracious thank you to you all. Send us your questions, and know that we are on an ambitious journey here together, following what Walter and Lao laid out: 1 lesson per week, 1 unit per month. So we won't say goodbye. We will say until next time. Take care, everyone.